Hey witches, Tiffany back again on Bewitching.Bemused if you don't already know me. Today's video is going to be an introduction to chaos magic. This is a video that I've actually been planning to do for a really long time, but I wasn't really sure what the interest level was, and this was a specific request from Elizabeth, so I just want to give a shout out and say also thank you so much for kind of kicking my lazy ass to actually get it started. Kicking my lazy ass in gear, I should say, with your comment. It's not like Elizabeth was harassing me for it or anything. So first and foremost, chaos magic is a system of magic, and it is one that I have been working with since almost the beginning of my practice. So today we are going to cover a few points. First and most importantly, what is chaos magic? Next up would be a brief history of chaos magic, then some beginner's practices to get you started, and then some book recommendations. Let's do this. So what is chaos magic? Okay, now if I had to sum it up in one sentence, I would describe it as a results-focused magical system within the psychological model of magic that validates no beliefs and all beliefs. Did I lose you yet? Hopefully not. First of all, chaos magic asserts that nothing is true, everything is permitted. Much like other forms of magic, chaos magic is a secular practice. If you practice any form of magic as a part of your spirituality, chaos magic can be added to it. However, if you practice magic just because you find it fulfilling and it's a nice tool to have, living life, then chaos magic can still be added to that. I find a lot of misconceptions come up about chaos magic because of its name, which sort of implies this haphazard kind of gung-ho approach to practicing it, but that's really not the case. And in fact, chaos magic does require something of a rigid discipline. A rigid discipline in its practice, while also having a loose belief set. So it's the practice that's rigid, whereas the beliefs are not. Chaos magic encourages practitioners to rid themselves of preconceived notions, shake off the shackles of hard-set beliefs, while also still embracing beliefs in a more flexible manner. Not that you have to shuck off your beliefs entirely, but that you should keep your mind open to new beliefs and just kind of be flexible and go with the flow of what feels right at any given time. And of course, what works, which we'll get to in a moment. As Phil Hine wrote in Condensed Chaos, An Introduction to Chaos Magic, if nothing is true, everything is permitted, then there is no purpose or grand cosmic scheme to life beyond what we choose to impose or believe. To some, this is cynicism. For the chaos magician, it is a breath of dizzying freedom. So the next part of explaining what chaos magic is the rule that you do what works. For the most part, it really just comes down to that. You need to be flexible and explore a variety of options, a variety of traditions and belief sets in order to just stick with what works for you, or, what worked last month may not work next month, and you can kind of go with the flow of that and be accepting of that and open to new possibilities and new things to experiment with. So for example, if you are appealing to Odin to expand your knowledge, but you're not really getting anything from working with him, you are making offerings and seeing no results, and you try doing the same thing except to the fictional character Hermione Granger because she is, known for being very intelligent, and you do get results, then do that. It does not matter that Hermione Granger is a fictional character. To most chaos magicians, the divine doesn't necessarily exist. This is a psychological model of magic, like I said. The divine works more as a mental archetype to help you, manifest your goals without it, the divine being an actual living entity. If you are a folk magic practitioner, but you get results by writing petitions in the Enochian alphabet, then do that. If you practice Western occultism and ceremonial magic, but putting a basil leaf in your wallet helps you attract money, then do it. And diversity in your practice and in your belief set is a big part of chaos magic. It does not mean that you have to completely forsake your religious or spiritual beliefs, just that you should be open to using other styles, traditions, and beliefs so long as they work, whether or not they fit in with your pre-existing beliefs. Now, some people might disagree with me and say that, no, you should wipe the slate clean and then work with this for a little while, and then wipe the slate clean and then work with that for a little while. And sure, while within Chaos Magic, that is ideal, it is much easier said than done. I will touch on this a little bit more once we get to beginner practices and deconditioning. Once again, to quote Phil Hine in Condensed Chaos, Chaos Magic is not about discarding all rules and restraints, but the process of discovering the most effective guidelines and disciplines which enable you to affect change in the world. Before we move on, I do want to talk about the psychological and meta models. I did already make a video talking about the 5 models of magic, and if you are interested in watching that, that is linked down below. But for those of you who are unfamiliar, putting it simply, the 5 models of magic attempt to explain how magic works by defining and categorizing them into 5 different types: spirit, energy, psychological, information, and meta. The main one you need to be familiar with today is the psychological model, which deals with projections of the mind. This model suggests that the unconscious mind manifests conscious will through the use of trance or gnosis and symbolism as a tool of association. The psychological model posits that we have the ability to shape our own reality if we condition ourselves, our minds, to do so. Now, some people believe that this is entirely placebo effect, while as others, myself included, think this is an area that just sort of sits outside of the brink of, scientific discovery of how the mind works and what it's capable of. I really believe that the human mind is capable of so much more than we have actually been able to prove yet. This is going to sound familiar if you have ever worked with the law of attraction or even visualization. You are visualizing what you want to manifest and you are projecting that into your spell tools, out into the universe. For the sake of avoiding any angry backlash, I do need to make a quick side note, and this is because, look, I'm an agnostic, so I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I'm totally cool with just being like, I don't know. Let me just say that whether or not Chaos Magic also utilizes some sort of supernatural power, divine or otherwise, in addition to psychological power, is highly debated. The reason for that is because it literally just cannot be proven one way or the other, or it hasn't yet. At the end of the day, mankind is a really long ways away from understanding how everything in the universe works. And while understanding the how of chaos magic would be nice, you don't really have to understand the how in order for it to work. But back to the psychological model. While, yes, chaos magic sits within the psychological model of magic as far as we can tell, its application may or may not, depending on the chaos magician and sometimes just depending on the day, fit better within the meta model. Now, if you'll remember from that previous video, the meta model is a hybrid that states that the practitioner will use whichever model or a combination of models that get the job done. Sound familiar? So chaos magic is practiced by using the meta model and kind of like being flexible with that in order to work with the psychological model. I really hope that made sense. At the end of the day, don't get hung up on the hows and the whys. That part is not really important in chaos magic. And for the most part, we don't know that about anything because nothing has been proven. All that matters is that it works. Next up, we're going to discuss a brief history of chaos magic, and I'm also going to clear up a couple more common misconceptions. Personally, I always find it much easier to understand a concept or a practice if I know at least a little bit about its history, so I'm I'm hoping that's what I'm doing for you guys today. Now, while many magical systems have their roots in ancient history and what we can parse from ancient practices, chaos magic is a relatively new concept and system. It came about in the 1970s, and it is said that the original chaos magicians were Ray Sherwin and Peter J. Carroll, who founded the Illuminates of Thanateros, or the IoT, which is what I'm just going to call it from now on. That was in 1976, but it really began to build momentum 2 years later in 1978 when Peter J. Carroll published the book Liber Noel, which you'll actually see sitting on the shelf behind me. It is one of the most highly recommended texts on chaos magic even today, and that's with very good reason. The IoT was founded due to a dissatisfaction with the state of occult groups at the time, and the IoT and chaos magic were kind of born out of a need for practicality and a focus on skill rather than dogma and forced tradition. They were heavily influenced by the works of artist and occultist Austin Osman Spare, Discordianism, the writings of Robert Anton Wilson, postmodernism, and the counterculture movements of the preceding decades. Now, while Austin Osman Spare has no actual ties to what is now known as chaos magic, and in fact he passed away before chaos magic or the IoT were founded, he is known as the grandfather of chaos magic. Now, he has a very long, very fascinating history that I highly recommend you look into, but we unfortunately just don't have time for today. But he is the person who developed the use of sigils and the technique of using gnosis to charge them. That's it for the history. To be perfectly transparent, I am leaving a lot out, but I did say it was gonna be brief. Now, to clear up a couple of those common misconceptions or things that people commonly don't understand or kind of get confused by, what's the difference between chaos magic and Discordianism? Like I mentioned earlier, the IoT did take a lot of inspiration from Discordianism, but the two are very different things. Discordianism is a religion centered around the worship of Eris, the Greek god of discord, and the idea that both order and disorder are illusions, that there should be value in chaos, randomness, and opposing forces. Now, it was originally a joke, but it did become established as a religion in order to point out the issues in mainstream religions. It's now considered a parody religion, using absurdist humor to spread its philosophy. I'm gonna read this next part off because the names are pretty long, so forgive me for not making constant eye contact. Discordianism was founded by Malaclips the Younger, otherwise known as Greg Hill, and, okay, here we go, and some of this pronunciation might be off, Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, also known as Lord Omar or Carrie Thornley. And this was in 1957 after the two of them had a series of shared hallucinations in a bowling alley. By 1965, Discordianism even had scripture in the form of a zine that included magic ritual and mythology. Now, there's probably a lot of differences that you're seeing in there, but the biggest takeaway is that Discordianism is a religion that uses magic and ritual, whereas chaos magic is not a religion at all, it is a system of magic. Now, if you found Discordianism at all interesting, what I just explained, or you like the idea of following a scripture that requires you to eat a hot dog with joy, wait, how does it go? Go off alone and partake joyously of a hot dog. So yeah, if you like that, I highly recommend you look more into it, but just know that the two terms are not interchangeable and they are definitely not the same thing. The next misconception I want to cover is whether or not chaos magic is the same as eclectic witchcraft. Now, it can be. I myself am both an eclectic witch and a chaos magician. But again, the two terms are not interchangeable. This comes down to the fact that an eclectic practitioner, whether or not they call themselves a witch, pulls from multiple different systems and belief sets to create a combination that is designed specifically to suit their needs and their own pre-existing beliefs. Maybe not even pre-existing beliefs, but pulling bits that make sense to them and sit right with them and sort of leave leaving the rest behind. Whereas chaos magic sort of rejects having a personal system at all. Again, I kind of debate that idea a little bit. Call me a bad chaos magician if you like. So like I've already said, I do believe, and some people disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine, but I do believe that you can be an eclectic witch and be a chaos magician at the same time. So now let's move on to beginner practices. This is probably the part a lot of you have been waiting for. Please keep in mind, I am just touching on the preliminary stuff, so some of this you've probably already heard in some of my other videos, particularly if you watched my video on sigils. But I am trying to do a broad overview of a lot of stuff and a very deep topic just in this single video. So if there is one thing in particular you want me to go in more depth on, or there's something that you noticed I didn't cover at all and you would like me to talk about, please let me know in the comments below. Or I also encourage you to check out the books I have linked below, which I will list at the end of the video. These are really just to kind of get the ball started for you, so you have a foundation to start with before you start doing further research or while you're beginning to do further research. Because I'm keeping this pretty limited, I do want to give you guys a bit of a variety, so I give you some foundational practices. I'm also going to give you some internal working practices, a couple of things for manifestation and, sort of spell work. And then finally, I'm also going to give you a divination technique. So before we jump into specific techniques, I do want to talk about the foundation you need to build. These are highly important and very basic practices that are fundamental to the use of chaos magic. So if you'll remember, way back when, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned how chaos magic is a disciplined system, and this is where that comes in. The first thing you're going to need to set up is daily meditation, which, if you guys know me, I say that about any type of magic because it's true. When it comes to chaos magic, a big reason why this is important is because you need to be able to achieve a Gnostic state, which I will touch on in more detail in just a moment. But the other reason is so you can learn to set it and forget it. Learning to set it and forget it. This is a skill that you build by the practice of just daily meditation, where you are able to force yourself to push the intention of your workings, your magical workings, out of your mind. That way you're not dwelling on it or obsessing over it. It's difficult to just completely forget it, but it's one of those things where if it pops into your mind, you want to be able to just kind of shoo it away, feel indifference towards it, because if you start hoping and thinking about it all the time, that's when you're going to manifest lust for results. Now, chaos magic is not the only magical system that will warn you to avoid lusting for results, but it is very, very important within chaos magic. It just basically says that if you are constantly thinking, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, you are going to that is going to kind of become your intention. You are going to then manifest the wanting of whatever it is you were actually trying to manifest, and then, well, there you go. You manifested the want to want the thing. That's a very sloppy and brief overview of what it means to manifest the lust for results, but I think you get what I'm saying. The other fundamental piece of the practice is keeping a magic journal. I've talked about this before. It's super important to keep a magic journal, not just within chaos magic, but once again, in every system. However, chaos magic itself is a lot about experimentation. The most important thing is just doing what works. So you want to keep a log where you can check, did this work? Did this not work? Okay, keep this, ditch that. I did publish a magic journal that I designed myself with every single bit of information that I could possibly think of. What moon phase was it? What was the time? What was the day? What was the incantation? What ingredients did you use? What was the intention? Oh, it manifested. When did it manifest? How did it manifest? But I have a whole video on that, and I will also link the journal down below in the description box if you're interested. But at the end of the day, all you need is a computer, a Word doc on your computer, or a pen and pencil, a notepad, and just start writing down what time did you cast your working, cast your spell, your sigil, whatever it was. What did you use? What was your intention? And then if or when the results manifest, when did that happen? Where did it happen and how did it play out? So those are your fundamentals, but moving on to the actual practice. The first one I already mentioned is gnosis. Gnosis is an altered state of consciousness. This is where you are able to direct your mind on a singular point with hyper intense focus. Now this is different from meditation because in meditation, it's a little more loosey-goosey and your mind will wander, and that's okay. You just have to realize it's wandering and bring it back to center. But achieving gnosis is a skill that you learn through the practice of meditation. Another reason why it's super important. So you can find that altered state of consciousness, even if it's just briefly, and just focus in on your one intention. There are 3 different categories of gnosis. There is inhibitory gnosis, there is excitatory or ecstatic gnosis, I've heard it called both things, and then there is also indifferent vacuity. Now keep in mind with this list of examples I'm going to give you, I do not recommend all of them because some are not legal, and some of them can also be dangerous. I'm just here to give you examples. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a drug dealer. Okay, here we go. Inhibitory gnosis can be achieved through the following: deep meditation done for the specific purpose of achieving gnosis, breathing techniques, hypnosis, fasting, sleeplessness, gazing, the death posture, hypnotic or trance-inducing drugs, and sensory deprivation. Excitatory or ecstatic gnosis can be achieved through dance, exercise, sex, masturbation, chanting, singing, drumming, intense emotional arousal such as fear, disgust, or anger, hyperventilation, mild hallucinogens, excitatory drugs, or sensory overload. Now those are just a few examples to kind of highlight what each means and what, how to achieve each, but I'm sure there's other ways that I'm leaving out. Finally, indifferent vacuity requires a moment of indifferent absent-mindedness. It's like if you're listening to a lecture and you are fully paying attention to the lecture, but then over here your hand is just like doodling on some paper. Or if you have, if you've ever experienced highway hypnosis, you just did a 20-minute commute to work and you don't remember any of it. Your mind is completely focused over here, while over here, you are performing a magical working just sheerly through muscle memory. Gnosis and learning to achieve gnosis can be a really rewarding mental and physical exercise just in and of itself. It's often used in combination with other chaos magic practices, such as charging sigils. Next up is deconditioning, which I've mentioned a couple times already. Okay, it is one thing to decide that you're just gonna hop from one belief set to the next and fully embrace each new one each time and fully let the previous ones go. And it's another thing to actually do it. As Peter J. Carroll wrote in Liber Noel, the idea of mind or ego as a fixed attribute or possession of self is illusory. Phil Hine expounds on this idea in Condensed Chaos by saying, our ego is a fiction of the stable selfhood which maintains itself by perpetuating the distinction of what I am / what I am not, what I like / what I don't like. Beliefs about one's politics, religion, gender preference, degree of free will, race, subculture, etc. all help maintain a stable sense of self. Now, I do not have the time in this particular video to fully explore ego death in depth, but you can see its importance in the evolution of the self if you explore Buddhism, Jungian psychology, Thelema, Timothy Leary's studies of the benefits of the use of hallucinogenic drugs on the psyche. But again, I will say, don't worry. Ego death is not about, and kind of losing that sense of self is not about just wiping the slate clean and having no personality. It's about deconditioning in order to question your preconceived notions, philosophies, and beliefs in order to discover your true self. It is pure self-awareness, understanding where these beliefs come from so you can decide if they're actually right for you, or if they were just forced on you. This is why I say that I don't personally believe that a chaos magician has to completely rewrite their history and let go of everything they've ever believed. One, deconditioning is a never-ending, ongoing process. But also there's this factor that you might discover, I have experienced ego death, I am, completely evolved as a person, and I still believe these things. Again, some chaos magicians will completely disagree with me and probably bash me in the comments. I don't care. That's just what I believe. So if you can decondition, you can distance yourself from this false self that has been thrusted upon you. And at that point, you can break away from these beliefs as you see fit. That frees yourself to believe in all things and to believe in nothing, because there is no attachment. It does also help you to avoid lusting after results. Like I said, it's not as easy or as simple as just a one-time procedure and you're done. It is a lifelong process you have to go through. Not only because it's very difficult, but also because you might rid yourself of some things and then other things come along and just stick in the back of your brain, whether you notice it or not. But you just have to allow yourself to constantly be looking inward. Don't worry, I will give you some practices before we leave today, but you have to constantly be looking inward, and you also have to be questioning everything about yourself and also about the world around you. If you're interested in sort of a list of all of these different exercises and also these beginner practices, but you don't want to keep having to rewind and fast forward and find the spot in the video, don't worry, the article is going to be published on the website at the same time as this video, so I will link that down below for easier referencing. In Libernal and Psychonaut by Peter Carroll, he suggests that you find one daily habit, and completely removing it from your routine and your behavior. You should not select anything that is possible of failure, and you should not select anything that is of any emotional, egocentric, or spiritual significance. Another option that Carroll offers is to take a 6-sided die. Assign each side with a set of beliefs. Say 1 is paganism, 2 is monotheism, and 3 is atheism, and so on. You select a time frame, a day, a week, a month, a year. A year seems a little bit long, but hey, it's up to you. You roll the die, and for however length of time you decided on, that's how long you are going to follow those beliefs, and then do it on repeat until you get through all 6. You can also get a little bit more specific with this if you want. Maybe number 1 is Norse paganism, and then number 2 is Buddhism, and then number 3 is Christianity. It's totally up to you. It's just a way to kind of begin practicing challenging everything that you know, challenging everything that you believe, adopting new beliefs, and then, once again, wipe the slate clean, set them aside. In Condensed Chaos, Phil Hines suggested writing from a third-person perspective an account of all of your strengths and weaknesses. Now, with that one, we're going to start getting into some suggestions that are also overlapping with shadow work, and that makes sense because ego death and shadow work kind of go hand in hand. So just remember as we move forward, because I'm going to give you some further journaling prompts, just be kind to yourself. If you need to take a break, take a break. Don't beat yourself up over things. This is an exercise of self-love. So just be kind and gentle and forgiving. Here are some journal prompts that I recommend. What am I scared of, and where did that fear come from? Who do I envy and why? What are some lies you've previously told yourself? What memories are you ashamed of, and why are you ashamed? What do you tend to judge about others? Take this a step further, and when you come across a person you might snap judge with a label, take a moment to think of a few reasons aside from your label that they may appear the way that they do. For example, if you see a woman in the store and she's got flip-flops on and she's got her hair's greasy and dirty and up in a messy bun, and she's got a baggy t-shirt with holes and stained sweatpants on, your first thought might be like, white trash, or, trailer park trash. And I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm just using, some common labels that exist within our society. But if you really stop and think about it, She could be a first-time mother who is completely sleep deprived. She could be recovering from a severe illness or surgery. Her spouse might have just died unexpectedly the day before. Those are all reasons why she appears as white trash or trailer trash when she actually isn't either of those things. So I really love that last exercise because it not only is an exercise of breaking down your own preconceived notions and beliefs in order to improve yourself as a person, but it also helps you to be kinder to others. Those are just a few exercises, and there are plenty more, and I highly recommend you check out Young for more exercises, and as well as the reading that I'm going to list below, which is specific to chaos magic. All right, next up is sigils, which is one of the most popular and most common practices in chaos magic. It's also very, very easy to do, and they're a lot of fun, and I know I've had a lot of success with them, so I think others will too. However, I already did an entire video on sigils, so I'm just going to link that down below and recommend that you head over to that video to check it out, because it's something like a 20-minute video where I go very much into depth, and I don't really have the time to do that here. The one thing I will say about that video is it's not 100% chaos magic. When I get to the section on charging your charging your sigils in order to empower them, I do give a couple of options that are not involving gnosis, such as using energy to charge them, like burning them or burying them in the earth, you know, using the 4 elements, that sort of thing. Now, on one hand, that's obviously sort of within the energy model of magic, so that's kind of more folk magic or pagan magic leaning, and therefore not chaos magic. And traditionally, I would say that there is a dividing line there, but I would also like to argue that as a chaos magician, tapping into using the 4 elements or energy manipulation, energy charging, the way that a pagan or a folk practitioner might, is still technically chaos magic. You've just adopted those beliefs for a bit. Because once again, at the end of the day, as long as it works, right? But anyway, check that video out. The final thing that I wanted to leave you guys with was a divination technique called the cut up technique. This technique is traditionally formed by cutting words out of like a newspaper or a magazine or something like that. You lay them out and then you shuffle them up and then you read what is there. You can also do this by splicing up, audio recordings, music, film, videos, pictures, yeah. And if you don't want to do this with physical means, there is a website that I will link down below where you can kind of like copy and paste a huge text into it and use it that way. That was really short to explain, but yeah, it's a super simple technique, but it's a lot of fun to play with. All right, finally, we have our book recommendations. The 2 big ones that I'm going to recommend, I have been quoting and talking about all throughout this. That is Liber Noel and Psychonaut by Peter J. Carroll. And that is also Condensed Chaos, An Introduction to Chaos Magic by Phil Hine, both of which are linked down below. The other one, I've done a review on it. I absolutely love this book, and it's so short and so funny, and yet it's so thorough and enlightening and clear. That is Advanced Magic for Beginners by Alan Chapman. So all 3 of those, and I guess my video review on Advanced Magic for Beginners, I'll link that down below too, just in case anybody's interested. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you guys found it informative and somewhat entertaining. There is a lot that I'm leaving out. Once again, there's servitors and egregores and just the overall philosophy into chaos magic and the IoT, and so much of that I am leaving out. If there's anything specific you would like me to cover, please leave it in a comment. I was gonna say a link, not a link, a comment down below. I'll also be releasing an article, so if you guys want to kind of see some of those exercises laid out, typed up, as opposed to having to constantly like rewind or find the spot in the video, the article will be released at the same time as this video, so I'll link to that down below as well. Anyway, I will see you all next week, and in the meantime, as always, please stay magical.